Hey there, art nerds! Today we are giving Josie Lewis a shot at art supply redemption. She has a Brea Reese collaboration going on at Michael's right now. So I have two of those collaborations. Both of them are watercolor. We have the 12 Bright Colors watercolor pan set, and we have her travel watercolor kit. And we are also going to take a look at the new color mixing companion. Explore and create fresh and vibrant color palettes with paint, collage, and mixed media. So I am really excited and looking forward to hopefully a little bit of art supply redemption as we are easily influenced by Josie Lewis. I just want to give you guys a little reminder before we dive in today's easily influenced that I do not know Josie Lewis. I reviewed her palette from her website. It was purchased by a friend of mine, Mary Catherine, and after they'd taken a look at it, they sent it on to me. So thank you again, Mary Catherine, for this. But we have had no interactions whatsoever. I have not sought any interactions. Josie has not contacted me. We do not know each other at all. I don't have any personal opinions about Josie. And while I am reviewing these products, I don't really expect Josie Lewis to be watching these. It's not like I am reviewing these for her or to make a point to her, or I'm like, hey senpai, notice me, or anything like this. Reviews are for consumers. They are for people who are interested in purchasing these products to know whether or not these products would be a good fit for them, for their art educational needs, and for the art that they wish to make. And that is what I am hoping to address here. If you really feel the need to send this video to Josie for whatever reason, I guess you could. That is not the intention for this. We don't have any beef. I'm not trying to start any beef. I do not know anything about Josie besides what has been posted on her social media and what I read in the book. So not really looking for that. Just looking to help other artists and art consumers decide whether or not they wish to purchase a product. And in my first video, we took a look at her social media presence in order to kind of learn how the sausage is made, how she's presenting herself, and to see what we as artists and aspirational artists can learn from this. So all opinions are my own. The products in today's review, the book and the two kits, were purchased out of pocket with funds raised from my Patreon at patreon.com/natosoup. If you like this series and you want to help me continue to do this series, you can join me over there. Just $2 a month gets you early access. I have not and will not be sharing the easily influenced videos as early access videos for a very good reason that I really just don't feel like getting into right here, but I am sharing them as premieres. So hi, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I am here in the chat, as are my fantastic mods, so take a moment to give them like, hey, hello, thank you for doing this. I really love these premieres. I like getting to hang out with you guys and chat and answer your questions and just generally chill out with you guys. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I also want to say I really like Josie's art. I think it is really cool. It makes my brain go burr. In fact, I bought this art kit because I like the art on the case. It makes me smile. It makes me happy. So let us talk about Josie Lewis's Brea Reese collaborations with Michaels and her book, The New Color Mixing Companion.
To share some context for how I first found out about this collaboration. It was through Josie sharing it over on her Instagram.
I'm so excited to tell you about my new product line that just launched at Michael's. You're gonna find watercolors and acrylics. There's travel kits, all-in-one kits, palette knives and brushes, paper pads. So exciting. One of my favorite supplies you can get is this Dragon Petal Thick Acrylic Supply Kit. It's got modeling paste and palette knives and all the colors, and then inside here there's panels, so you can make a painting with me Everything's included. Right now, these supplies are 20% off with a code at michaels.com. So you should totally get one, and I cannot wait to see what you make. I'm so
Being both easily influenced and impulsive, I went on to michaels.com to decide which sets I wanted to order. I ended up going with the travel set that you guys see here, as well as with the bright set. And not only did I pay full price, but I also paid for delivery, which is a little bit ridiculous, but I wasn't sure when I would actually make it out to Michaels, and I wasn't sure whether or not my Michaels would have these sets, and I really wanted to take a look at them for you guys. I actually wanted to get to them sooner. It just took me a little while to get to them. Of course, I did end up going to Michaels and they were 50% off, which is pretty disappointing when you think about paying full price. But they had a lot of different sets and a lot of different kits available in person.
We have a really colorful table here today, and that is because our table is full of Josie Lewis. You guys might remember when I reviewed the palette from her site that my friend Mary Catherine sent me to review. And you guys might also remember us kind of taking a peek at her social media and getting kind of a feel for the vibe that she has over there. Since then, she announced and released a collaboration with Michaels. And I have 2 of those collaboration products today. I tried to go for things I felt like I could get use out of, that I might like, and that were different enough from everything else. Now, if you're into acrylics, she does have some really interesting acrylics products as well. So this is not, the best of the best. It's just really what appealed to me. So we have the on-the-go watercolor paint set, and we have the watercolor pan set. And these are released through Brea Reese. And you guys might remember when I reviewed one of those Brea Reese watercolor kits. Brea Reese isn't really a person, it's just a brand name. The on-the-go watercolor paint set is a 38-piece set. It includes a watercolor pan set, paper pad brushes, and technique guide. And you can see that here on the back. Take along for whenever inspiration strikes. Make a mini masterpiece on the go. Set includes a zippered case, 1 watercolor pan set with 9 bright colors, 1 watercolor paper pad, 2 round brushes, 1 water brush, and a technique guide. And then you can follow along with me at home, and there is a little QR code that I will probably check out a little bit later. And then the watercolor pan set is 12 bright colors. It's in this plastic container. They do look like they've been poured. There is what looks like maybe it had melted and the color transferred over. We're going to find out. Paint the rainbow with these rich and vibrant colors. Using a brush, add water directly to the pans. Hey, bonjour. I'm Josie. I'm an artist, teacher, and die-hard color lover. I love helping you art-curious types take brave action on exploring art making. Now, come on, let's create something amazing together. And no, I'm not going to read that in French. I could, and I'll probably make a fool of myself. And then we have the follow along at home QR code again. We also have, this is not from Michaels, the new color mixing companion. Explore and create fresh and vibrant color palettes with paint, collage, and mixed media. So since we're not going to be taking a look at Josie's social media, I thought it'd be really cool to take a look at one of her books, especially because honestly, the book part of the Easily Influenced series is kind of becoming my favorite part. I have learned a lot. I've seen a lot of really beautiful art. I've even gotten a couple new watercolor books that I can recommend to you guys. And I'm getting a lot of ideas for my own watercolor book that I will be working on at some point when I finish working on the game. So this comes with templates for painting your own color patterns. Move this over. We are going to do a full flip through as well, but this is actually, it just came in today. I've been waiting on it. So I just kind of wanted to flip through it. Something I am already kind of noticing is it is yet another very wordy art book. And by that I mean there's a lot of words with okay, here we got some paint pictures. A lot of words with relatively few pictures. And these are templates. I would not recommend actually painting them in the book. This paper is not really cut out for that. You would probably scan it and then print it out onto the paper of your choice. Kind of like how I do my coloring book, where if you don't like the, actually, let me just show you guys. So kind of like with my coloring book, if you don't like the paper it's on, I actually have a link at the front where you can download them and print it on the paper of your choice. So if you like your art, you want to color along with me, or maybe you're looking for something to do with your new watercolors, you can find this and so much more over in the Natto shop. I'm going to get started with these 2 watercolor kits, and we will save the book for when I've actually had a chance to read and take notes on the book. These were purchased from Michaels online. They delivered them to me. I have seen them in my Michaels. I've had friends talk about seeing these in their Michaels. So you have some options. You can find them in the Michaels storefront. You can find them in person. Frankly, if you can find them in person, that's going to be cheaper because delivery with Michaels is always just real weird. And I wanted to get a hold of these sooner rather than later, and then Lilliputian Living happened, and I didn't get a chance to look at them for a whole month anyway. So we're going to take a look at the on-the-go watercolor paint set first. And I actually had kind of a hard time deciding what I wanted to order and try out for you guys. And one of the reasons I went with this set is I actually really like the case. I think the case is very cute, and I can see myself using the case. So that tells you I don't necessarily have super high hopes for the paints. Now, they do look like they might be superior brand paints, and if they are, I might feel a little bit better about the paints themselves. I also, like I said, forgot how much I paid for this, so I'm sure that will color my opinion on the set when I actually look it up. The packaging is cardboard. It shows you most of what is in this set, and it is held shut with tape dots on the side, which, you know, are a little bit hard to see, a little bit hard to deal with, and frankly, they're cellophane, they're plastic. They're never going to biodegrade. We could just use paper for that. Otherwise, I do appreciate that there's not really a lot of plastic going on in this packaging, mostly paper. So it is a zippered enclosure with a watercolor rainbow across the front. It's really cute. Don't know if I love the print quality. I know it's a nitpicky thing. I've been doing a lot of art prints. Actually, let me just show you guys. As a comic artist, print quality is actually pretty dang important to me. And ever since I started offering art prints, print quality has become really important to me. I don't want pixelization. I don't want it to be too dark. Some of them are a little bit dark. These are actually proofs. That's why they're not signed. So some of them are a little bit darker than I'd like. I don't want any weird artifacting. I don't want any weird color shifts. I want it to look as good or better than the original. And when I get my proofs, I usually pull out the originals and compare them. So to me, print quality is really important. And while it's not terrible, and I do know that printing on items can be challenging, it does seem like maybe the scan was not a 600 DPI or a higher scan. Maybe it was not saved correctly and there's some artifacting. I know that is like a super weird thing to be noticing and pointing out. It's just been on my mind lately. Otherwise, I think the case is really cute. I kind of do wish it had a handle, but that is, you know, kind of a nitpick. It's one of those cases that's kind of like a hybrid hard and soft case where it's like got some structure to it. You guys ready for the reveal? The interior presentation so far, decent. This would make a good, possibly, having not swatched anything, might make a good Christmas present, particularly for someone who is interested in getting into watercolor. We have our Do Not Eat Delicious activated carbon rather than the silica packets. I actually hold on to those and use them for shows to help make sure that my paper goods don't bend as they absorb water. We have our watercolors. We have our water brush. We have two very cheap brushes. We have a swatch card that is actually, it's a very thin embossed watercolor cellulose paper, but it is, you know, it is receptive to watercolor. So that's actually pretty good. We've seen a lot worse. We have a technique guide. We'll look at that in a moment. And we have a pad of watercolor paper. So the technique guide, is this all in French? No, it is not. Half of it is in French. So it's actually half the length. It's not as long as it looks because half of it's in French. And I mean, being Louisianian and having family from Canada, I do appreciate the French, the Francais. And I did take a lot of French, like a lot of French. Like when y'all complain about my German pronunciation, you should know I took only French, and I'm garbage at French. That said, it's a technique guide. I don't love that, like, it's if you're going to have it in another language, it should be twice as long, but whatever. It is a very cute little zine. It is in full color. We have that QR code. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will, however, read about the artist in case you didn't watch my first Josie Lewis video. That's not really relevant to this video probably, but if this video piques your interest, you should check that out. I'll put it in the cards. This is part of my Easily Influenced series where I take popular and influential artists or art influencers and I look at their books, I look at some of their products, and I look at their web presence to see what we can learn from all these things and to see if these products are a good fit for you or for me as an artist. I'm Becca Hilburn. I'm a watercolor comic artist and illustrator. I went to SCAD and I have an MFA in sequential art, which is comics. I've been painting with watercolor for about 15 years now, and I've been reviewing art supplies for about 10 years now. So that kind of gives you guys a little idea of where I'm coming from. I do not know Josie Lewis at all. I do not know any of the artists whose products I have purchased at all. Products are purchased out of my pocket with funds raised from my Patreon. So if you like what I do and you want to help me continue to do these kind of reviews, which are as unbiased as I can possibly manage as a watercolor comic artist, you can join me at patreon.com/natosoup. If I sound a little weird, huffy and puffy, out of breath today, I'm actually having a bad Sjogren's day, and I still wanted to hang out with you guys. I still wanted to spend time with you guys looking at some awesome, well, they're very colorful. I don't know if they're awesome yet, but they are very colorful. So if I sound a little weird, I'm just not feeling my best, but I love hanging out with you guys, and this is what I wanted to do with my time, so I'm here for it. We're going to do it. So about the artist. Meet your instructor, Josie Lewis. Josie is a lifelong artist with a love for color. She joyfully explores all the art materials from acrylic to ink to clay to markers. Josie's original art has been collected worldwide. She has also taught thousands of artists how to express themselves artistically. You can find her on social media at Josie Lewis Art. She lives in Minneapolis with her husband, daughter, and calico cat Needles. That is a very good name for a cat. So this is actually geared for this set, since it, literally shows the set. It also walks us through the tools. And I kind of like that, actually. I think I have talked about art kits before, not providing enough instruction for you to get started. I kind of feel like somebody out there listened to me. So thank you. Good. Because that makes this so much more giveable as a gift, especially because not everyone has internet access. Not everyone has unlimited internet access. Not everyone has a smartphone. If you're giving this to a tween, a teen, or an older person, their internet usage, believe it or not, might be quite sporadic for various reasons, whether you live somewhere very rural and remote, or your parents don't want you having infinite access to the internet, which increasingly I can understand why, or you're just done with dealing with the internet and you don't feel like doing the internet. I actually like that the information is all presented here. She does call this, she calls the paint in here high quality watercolor. We will see. I will try to leave myself open-minded to that. She also keeps a blank swatch page handy throughout the whole process of painting so she can continually test the colors she makes. I think that's a really good idea. I'm really glad she suggests that. That is something that I used to do a lot more. And I still do from time to time. We do have a little bit of color theory. You actually don't really need a whole lot in a book like this. You don't need a whole lot more than that. I say that, but we bought her book on using color, so it'll be really interesting to kind of juxtapose how this is presented and how this is presented against what she actually says in her book. I'm kind of looking forward to that. She has some tips and techniques. She calls it a color veil. I think most of us call that glazing. Yeah, yellow over pink will create an orange. Yeah, that's just glazing, y'all. Talks about watercolor edges. We actually get some example photos. I think the presentation is very cute. I do wish, of course, I wish the photos were bigger. I always wish the photos were bigger. She talks about texture, including granulation. So maybe that's something we should look for with these paints, whether or not they granulate. She talks about adding salt. She calls this effect burnt edges, where you dab in the color along the edges. And that's it. The rest of it is in French, en français. So I kind of wish there was more to it, but I think it touches on some stuff. And then she also has a QR code, which I am not going to show you guys, but I am probably going to watch on my own time. It's literally on the back of the package that they sell at Walmart. So, I mean, you know, it's not like I'm giving away the secret sauce here. So let's take a look. I do wish, just for reusable sake, I actually wish this side here had more loops. It does seem like it is purposed to this, but just a couple more loops on either side so you can include an eraser, a pencil sharpener, a water-safe pen or marker would just be really thoughtful. They don't have to include those things, but I'm sure people who are interested in watercolor have at least a pencil they would like to be able to use, so that would be really helpful. This is her watercolor pans, Brea Reese featuring Josie Lewis. And it's, hang on one second. They don't smell horrible. They definitely are giving me, they either are like the Peerless collab that they did with Scrawler Box, or is it Vivi Viva? One of the dye-based paper watercolor brands did like half pans for, was it Scrawler Box or was it Sketchbox? One of the two. Anyway, kind of looks like that. Also kind of reminds me of some of the Superior watercolors that I've reviewed in the past. So they are in a really cheap plastic liner. And there is just like no paint. They are such thin chiclets. There's like no paint in here. Oh, if you are familiar with those watercolor fans or those watercolor fold-out placemats, that's Superior. Superior makes those. I actually like them. Don't like the format of the fan, but I like the quality of the paint, and I really liked the weird watercolor placemat. I like fell in love with that thing. I'll try to include clips from that for you guys so you guys can kind of get an idea of what I was talking about. And I did do a whole field test with the folding fan, folding screen thing, and liked it. This is a pretty cheap water brush, very similar to the ones they have now at Dollar Tree, just twice the length. It's fine. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of water brushes, so like, I'm not the one to be like, Niji and Yasutoma are the only ones you can get. You can only use Kuretake. Anything else is trash. It's fine. These brushes, though, are kind of where the complaint department kicks in. They are synthetic, which, who is surprised? The handles, they feel like plastic, but I think they are a lacquered wood. They are very light. The ferrules is very thin, inexpensive metal. It is synthetic. They are very short brushes. And since some of you guys might be watching this because you want to give this to someone as a gift, I'm going to go grab a couple of regular watercolor brushes to show you guys just how short these rounds are. Okay, so I have two silver black velvets. This is a 6, this is a 6. So you can actually see this 6, and this still has sizing in it. This 6 is a little bit longer and a little bit thinner than this. This is a 2, and this is a 2. It's kind of thick for a 2, and this one's a little narrower, and it comes to a finer point. And oh, dang, there we go. It's black on black, it's not gonna work. There we go. Okay. So, you know, different brands make different sizes for their rounds. A 2 in one size is not going to be a 2 in another, but they just feel very short. This is an 8 by Royal Langnickel Zen, and this is much longer. So generally, you would look for a longer brush than this. This just seems very short and stubby. It's going to be very scrubby. It's going to be really prone to picking the watercolor back up off the paper, especially because I have a strong sneaking suspicion that the watercolor paper included in our paper pad, our bloc de papier, is probably cellulose. It doesn't say, and I have found that with watercolor, when it doesn't say, it's probably cellulose. And not that cellulose is like the worst thing in the world to paint on, but it is different from painting on a cotton rag. You can't quite do all the techniques that you could do on a cotton rag, and it honestly does take some practice and some getting used to. So while I paint on both cellulose and cotton rag, in fact, I paint my comic pages on cellulose, I do wish companies would reconsider relabeling. I can't get this open. This is on so tight. Reconsider relabeling their cotton rag away from student grade, just because it's just not the best learning experience. That's my little pet peeve hobby horse. So, whatever, I'll just be real. Whatever I paid for this set, I kind of feel like I paid too much for this set, but I'll also be real. I kind of knew that getting into this because I have not been super impressed with the, I want to say Michael's collabs. They're not really Michael's collabs. Like Jane Davenport did a collab with American Crafts that I wasn't super impressed with. The price point was kind of high for what you got. And now we have the Josie Lewis Brea Reese collab. Again, it's just kind of expensive for what you're getting. I do think, having not swatched anything, it is a bit of a fan product. You like Josie Lewis's stuff. You want to own something with her art on it. You find it inspiring. You see this at Michael's. You think, oh, that's awesome. And you pick it up. The other market I see for this is like, the other kits are like all-inclusive kits for the most part. I could see a parent, a grandparent picking it up for a teen or a young 20-something. That doesn't make it bad. It just makes it kind of overpriced for what it is, because almost whenever you get a kit, not every kit I've ever seen. In fact, I have a kit from China that I actually really like. But generally with kits, you are paying them for the convenience of them curating it. And it's going to be a little bit more expensive, not necessarily than if you bought it open stock, but it's just not going to be as full an experience. You're not going to get as many things, you know. So I find like kits are usually something I don't typically recommend, because just in general, unless it's a brand I really like almost said Faber-Castell. I used to really like Faber-Castell. There's some things from Faber-Castell that I really like, and their kits are pretty good, especially the ones in their Emerald line. I'm not super hot on Faber-Castell, but like, unless it's a brand you are very familiar, like Winsor Newton, if they put together a kit, it would probably be worth the money they're charging, even if it's kind of expensive. We are going to slide this just over to the side for a little bit, and we're going to take a look at the Brea Reese watercolor pan set. I keep wanting to say it all wrong, not on purpose. My brain is just, the Sjogren's and the ADHD are conspiring against me today. So we're just going to do our best. This is also packaged in cardboard. It has just one tape dot, which I appreciate. Inside is a black, thin, flimsy plastic tray. There is actually stuff in it. I was not expecting that. I kind of like that. And then inside our black tray is this small plastic palette. It's actually not that flimsy. It does have a plastic lid, and it does look like my paints had melted. Not super surprised. It was very, 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 very hot in Louisiana this summer. It does tell me that they might be glycerin based, which is kind of what I was thinking anyway, because I was getting like strong Yarka and Prang vibes from these. So not the biggest deal, just probably kind of overpriced for what we're getting. This is our swatch card. I think it is very cute. I love that it aligns with the palette itself. And then we have another technique guide. Let's see if this one is any different. It would be really cool if every technique guide was keyed to the product and they all cover different things. Handy tools. Okay, so we do actually have some different recommendations. The 2 cups of water thing. That's something I recommend, and yet I cannot do because I don't have enough table space, but I do think it's a good idea. Paper towels, a hair dryer, tape, a water spritz bottle. We have the same tips and techniques. No, we don't actually. She talks about color veils, but the watercolor edges is a new thing. Maybe I skipped some pages in the first one because then we have the same thing in the other one, talking about granulation, salt, burnt edges, and washi tape. And then, no, it's in a different order, I think. And then we have our color wheel. So it is a little bit disappointing that it is basically the same guide, just things are in a different order. And this one doesn't even have a page specifying what this product is. So, you know, I was kind of thinking that would be a really good reason to purchase multiple of these sets is, oh, Josie's going to teach you a different technique in every kit, even though she doesn't really demonstrate anything and she doesn't really spend any time explaining it in these little guides. But, you know, I'm holding out hope. We got this QR code that hopefully doesn't just go to her social media. So we have our work cut out for us. I'm trying to decide if I want to do any swatching on a cotton rag paper or just use the paper that they provide. I'm also trying to get this back in and does not want to go back in once it is out. I definitely am going to swatch on the swatch cards that they provide, but I do want to still kind of think about it, and we will find out. I'll let you know when I decide. How's that sound? So it's been a couple hours. I have not actually decided yet if I want to swatch on cotton rag paper, but what's going to help me decide whether or not I do is I'm going to go ahead and swatch on the included swatch sheets and see how I feel about that. So this one has already gotten, is that cat hair? Is that a smudge? One can never know. We're going to start with the travel set, and then we will move on to the watercolor pan set. And I already know I am not going to like these brushes. So to be as fair as I can, I am going to test these brushes later, but to be as fair as I can, I am going to use a nicer brush for the swatches just to give it a chance. These are way less saturated than I expected, and even taped down, her swatch card starts to buckle because it's pretty thin. This format of watercolors is kind of weird. Thin chiclets of paint with a lot of just empty box space. I'm assuming these are Superior because that's the only other brand where I've encountered these kind of chiclets, but I'd be really interested in knowing where Brea Reese got these from. If it's not Superior, why this format? Why not just half pans in a similar container? There isn't even a mixing surface for this. It's all just metal, no white enamel for mixing in the lid. I feel like the colors in this set do a better job reflecting Josie's taste in colors than the Mungyo set she sold on her site. I'm seeing some granulation with these, so these might merit swatching on cotton rag paper. It's weird that right now I might like these better than the palette she was selling on her site. We will have to see.
I am getting big Yarka vibes, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Colors activate really readily, although lots of them seem very dark. That's just the mass tone. When swatched out, there are a lot of jewel tones. Including the swatch card was a very smart idea. The melting issue does make some colors unusable. I chopped up the red violet as much as I could and added a bunch of water, hoping it'll kind of melt down and then dry into place. I don't really blame Brea Reese or Josie Lewis for this. This was the result of really high heat in Louisiana, and it did melt back down. This mini palette is much better quality than I really expected. Both watercolor palettes feel more Josie Lewis than the palette she sold on her site, but this 12 bright color palette feels particularly Josie Lewis. The color selection, ease of use, larger pan sizes, and the shape itself. I would have preferred this palette in the travel set than the palette they chose to include. Both palettes warrant swatching on cotton rag paper. I also think both palettes are aiming for a similar color gamut, but aren't quite hitting the same thing. So I was able to melt some of this red violet back into the red violet pan. So I broke off some of the blue that had chipped off, and I'm trying to melt it back into its pan as well, because it was just like all melted over. I don't know what these are made of off the top of my head, but I mean, I messed with them with my hands and they didn't get on my hands and they didn't stain, and they also smell a little bit like glue. That said, the mini palette is much better quality than I expected. It is, you know, big Yarka vibes, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, as for these, I'm really feeling like that these might be superior watercolors with their chiclette form. I don't like how much space they take up versus how much paint you get. I don't really think that's fair. And I do think this palette might be a better fit than this palette for that kit. I actually just like this palette a little more in general. It has more Josie Lewis vibes really than what we have right here. This is so far fine, but this is definitely a little bit better. And there's actually a little bit of mixing space in there. Both watercolor palettes feel more Josie Lewis than the palette she sold on her site, but the 12 bright color palette feels particularly Josie Lewis. The color selection, the ease of use, the larger pan sizes, and the shape of the palette itself. I would have preferred this palette in the travel set over this palette that they chose to include. Both of these palettes weren't swatching on watercolor or on cotton rag watercolor paper. I also think both palettes are aiming for a similar color gamut, and you can kind of see that here, but they aren't quite hitting the same thing. And this is kind of the color gamut that I think of, or the color story that I think of when I think of Josie Lewis, where we have, let me move some things out of the way, where we have a lot of really bright primaries, and then we start getting like a hint of a darker color here and there. So I think this color and this color are trying to be the same thing. I think this color and this color are trying to be the same thing. I think this color and this color are trying to be the same thing. And I think this color and this color are trying to be the same thing. Oh, and this color and this color. So there's a lot of color commonalities. What's weird is it isn't just like one set is inherently better than the other. Like I like the magenta better in this thing, but I like the red violet better in this thing. And I think I like the turquoise a little bit better in this thing as well.
So, but the thing is, there's so many color duplicates, I really couldn't recommend you get both. I know she has at least one other colorway of this. I think it might be muted colors, it might be pastel colors. I will have to double check for you guys. If it's muted colors, what I would recommend you do, I don't know, that travel palette is so expensive. So what I am going to do is I'm going to let this kind of melt back down. And what you do, I guess I could have like put it in the oven and attempted to melt it back into its half pan. But I'm just dousing it with water, letting it like literally melt into the water. And then when the water evaporates, it's going to re-solidify. I already did that. Oh, you can tell I already did that with this one. And it has not yet set back up, but it should set back up. So I guess this is going to need a good amount of time to dry before we can pull out the cotton rag. An update on this palette. The paint that I chipped off, I was able to melt it back down into place. It is mostly solid, but it's still kind of mushy. So I feel a little conflicted about adding more water to it now. I actually have the dehydrator running in another room for another reason. So I think for a little while, I'm gonna go pop this in there just to, you know, hopefully dry it out a little bit further. But while that's drying, that doesn't have to stop us. I want to swatch both sets on cotton rag paper because I was relatively impressed with how these handled on their own swatch cards. I see some potential there. Now, honestly, are these designed to be used on a cotton rag paper? Probably not. She's got these pre-printed watercolor, like, they're kind of like coloring books. And I have a feeling that these sets are kind of meant to be used with that, as well as like the paper pads that she's selling. But when has that ever stopped me? And don't worry, we are actually going to test these out on the included paper pad from the travel set. But I did want to see if maybe they would perform just a little bit better or maybe a little bit worse on a cotton rag paper. We are going to start with the set from the travel set. And I was debating whether or not I even care enough to do the black line across the page. It does kind of help make everything look a lot neater, and it does kind of help everything stay in place. I also want to point out, I think I mentioned this earlier, there isn't really a mixing surface in this. I realize that these are wells, but I mean she could have had, I say she, Brea Reese, the company, because I don't think Josie necessarily had a lot of like individual item final say. Just that seems to be the case in these kind of collabs. This could have been coated with enamel, or they could have done a plastic insert to facilitate mixing. Technically, yes, you can mix on this. It will rust though. So, but honestly, is this built for longevity? Really? Look how thin those little chiclets are.
Many of these colors seem to granulate a lot, which is interesting. It's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it does add visual interest to wet into wet and layering. I mean, veiling techniques.
So far, these are about on par with how they swatched on her paper. So I would say switching over to a cotton rag isn't going to make these paints perform any better. They're still fine though. Like, I'm not really seeing any red flags other than, look, let's be real. These are going to be student grade paints. They are not the best paints, but they're fairly inexpensive. They were sold in a set and they were sold at Michael's. So my expectations of these are really not that high. These would be at the midpoint between Student Grade Showdown and Easily Influenced, right? So like I'm trying to like temper my expectations, but I want to make that clear to you guys. These are not professional grade paints. I don't feel like they're positing themselves as professional grade paints to people who are familiar with professional grade paints. I do think though that people who are less familiar with watercolor or not familiar with art supplies in general might think that these are professional grade paints. They're not terrible though. I'm not slamming them. They're fine student grade, and I'm really kind of getting the feeling that these are probably superior chiclets that have been rebranded. So I'm kind of working with that assumption. So now we're going to do a little color mixing. I am going to mix in this, what they have provided right here. We're going to use the source that they have. I am still not working with the brushes that they provided because I can tell those brushes are bad news and are going to make me sad and are going to make me angry, and I want to just take a look at the paints for now.
I really feel like these are probably superior watercolors, and I like these better than the palette she was selling from her site. While many of the colors are drying quite a bit more desaturated than they were when they were wet, it's very easy to mix some bright, interesting secondary colors with the color selection here, and the colors just make sense based on Josie's work.
I'm pretty sure these are superior. I'm really glad she went with superior. This is an upgrade, in my opinion, on the palette she was selling. It addressed some of the problems that I really had with it. And I really like the colors she picked for this. For mixing fun, bright secondary colors, this set, minus the red violet here, that's kind of meh, but this set is a knock out of the park. It really has a lot of the same elements that the core high chroma set has going for it. And it's just a personal preference. I don't love this color. You could mix some good browns with it, but in general, I think whoever decided on the color palette, whether it was her or whether the company told her this is what you got to work with, I think that was a smart move. This makes a lot of sense for what I'm seeing from Josie Lewis's art. So all of these are pretty, they're that weird zone between standing and lifting. So we can get some lift, but not as much lift as you might expect. Pretty in keeping, I feel like, with the superior watercolors that I've taken a look at in the past. I'm going to check and see how easy this is to wipe out. If you were planning on using this palette for longer, if you were going to refill it, etc., I would really recommend finding something to put in to use as your mixing surface, just because you don't want it rusting on you. If you can prevent that, you might not care. It might not be that big of a deal. It's just one of those little additional nice touches that would have been good to see, but it wasn't included. So now for this little probably glycerin based palette. I had it in the room with the dehumidifier for about an hour. It's firmed up a little bit. It'll finish firming up. I just don't want to pick up more with my brush and waste it. But I also don't want to wait several days for it to finish drying out. However, if you had the problem where it melted, you can just break it off, put it back in its little, not a half pan, in its little well, add a bunch of water and just let it evaporate. It will re-solidify. So that's actually great news if it breaks in transit. Of course, if it breaks in transit, you might want to return it if you still can. So let's say it breaks in travel, because this isn't really the sturdiest or the most travel-friendly packaging. On that note, I can see why they didn't include this one with the travel palette.
Some of the colors in this set, in fact, many of the colors in this set are kind of hard to get going, which is surprising for glycerin watercolors. And they dry very light and not nearly as granulating as the travel set.
These seem to be going for the same color palette, but these are definitely not the same paints. Some of the colors have a lot of trouble reactivating, and since these seem to be glycerin based paints, you don't want to add too much water or pre-activate them because they're going to turn to a soupy mess really quickly. So it kind of becomes a bit of a struggle to use them.
The included mixing space, as in the empty space here in the middle, isn't really big enough for much color mixing, and it stains very easily.
the paints haven't dried yet, but this tiny mixing space, that's kind of frustrating. You could use the plastic lid and wipe that out. Maybe I should have thought of that. I also wanted to see, because this is kind of like a matte plastic, I wanted to see if how badly the paints are going to stain the mixing surface. And while that's not the end of the world, it does bother some people. Oh, they stain. Who's surprised? They stain. It's not the end of the world. You can still paint on it. It's not going to ruin the paints as long as you get all the paint up. But it does make your palette look bad quicker. And while I don't at all think social media is the end all be all, or it should be the reason why you do certain things, I will say social media does not like a used workspace like what I have. It does not do well on the grams. It does not photograph well. So if that is something you care about in terms of aesthetic art supplies, and mine came already damaged, so that was already out of the window. But if you care about aesthetic art supplies, this is an aesthetic little palette, and the staining is kind of a problem for people who care about that. I, as you guys know, looking at my nasty workspace, y'all know that doesn't bother me, but I thought I'd point it out because I know it does bother some people. But this staining, it's not going to affect how the paints mix on top of it. Plastic is a little bit porous. That's an interesting point though about what these paints might contain, that the yellows would stain so quickly, because I really thought the turquoise blue, phthalo blues stain so bad. Anybody who's into fountain pens, y'all know how bad phthalos stain. So I expected this and maybe the magenta to stain, not so much the yellow.
Everything looks kind of the same with this palette. I want to be clear, I don't know for a fact that these are glycerin-based paints. They are just in a format that seems very similar to glycerin-based paints, and they behave like glycerin-based paints. They really give me like Yarka student, young children vibes. So for my friends who use Yarka regularly, and I also want to point out, like, I reviewed Yarka Student years ago on my friend Kabocha's recommendation. I actually really liked it. They are good watercolors for work for reproduction, working on a very limited budget, or if you have small children in your house and you really do not want toxic pigments around, they can be great. They are good as a travel set. They activate very quickly. My only problem with them is they can be kind of hard to find in the real world. Praying is another good option. So I'm not dissing those paints. And by comparing these to those, it's not meant as a huge insult. I particularly like those Yarka paints, and I'll try to remember to link the review I did years and years and years ago. You can also find them under the Jack Richardson brand name, which I think Jerry's Artorama carries. But these are giving me really strong Yarka vibes, and any of my friends who are using Yarka watercolors, let me know if, not the format it's in, obviously, but like the formulation, the color intensity, the working properties, if y'all are getting Yarka vibes too. I would do a comparison swatch, but I have rehomed my Yarka watercolors long ago, so I don't have them anymore. They're making somebody else happy, and that makes me happy. So I'm relying on you guys for this. But they lift fairly easily. It is hard to get good color payoff. They're all kind of weak in terms of the amount of color. For glycerin watercolors, that's kind of weird, because with glycerin watercolors, they're held in with a glycerin binder, and that's a little more hydrophilic than gum arabic binder, which is still fairly hydrophilic. It's going to suck that water in, but these can turn to soup and to mush very quickly. So I didn't want to add too much water, but I also needed to really get them going. And compared to the travel set, they just don't want to move. Initially, I thought I would prefer this little palette over the travel set, but now that we're kind of getting into these, I think I prefer the travel set over the brights. And while you do get more colors with the brights, in terms of mixing, you can mix what you would be missing pretty easily from the travel set, and the color intensity is just much stronger. There's more color there. The only color I have a little bit of a problem with, I'm not like, okay, I like this color. It suits my aesthetic. I don't like love it in this palette, but I have seen Josie use that color, so we're not really going to comment on that.
This green, you can see they've added a little bit of what looks like PBK 11 or maybe PBK 7. They added some black to make it look a little darker. This is something that Chinese watercolors, especially the ones I've seen on AliExpress, often will do with, say, sepia to get it dark enough rather than using more expensive pigments. Viridian is one of those colors that is, maybe this is a phthalo blue green, but Viridian is one of those colors that's always kind of like, you know? So I would have actually opted not to include this and maybe gone with a phthalo blue instead. We do have a really beautiful turquoise as well. So if they had gone with a phthalo blue, you could have mixed this from what we have. But anyway, I think this set of watercolors here, the travel set, is actually a little higher quality, a little more of what I would be looking for making watercolor art if you're an older teen or an artist. This set, the little bright set, a little overpriced, a little underwhelming, a little hard to deal with. It's kind of got the Gansai vibes without the Gansai quality. If you're looking for this style of watercolor and you like this style of watercolor, I would really recommend you check out the Kuretake Gansai Tambi lineup. You might find something that you like. I don't feel the need to do a mud test with these. Actually, I don't think I've ever done a mud test with the Chiclet style Superior. Maybe I have. I've reviewed a lot of Chiclet style Superior watercolors. So I'll do some digging, but even if I haven't, I don't really feel the need to do a mud test with these because I did do a field test that turned out really cute. I'm going to link it for you guys. I know how Superior watercolors handle. I don't feel like I need to do a mud test for this. And also because in general, Josie's work is not super layered. It is not super wet into wet, layer on top of layer on top of layer. And I assume if you're buying these watercolors, if you're buying these kits, if you're buying the pre-printed sheets, it's because you want to paint like Josie. You're not buying these because you want to paint a watercolor comic or you want to paint watercolor illustrations. You're buying these because you like the art on the outside of the box and you want to be able to do something like that. So I'm not going to do the mud test for this. I am, however, going to move on to the rest of the travel set because we still have to look at the paper and the brushes. So we return to the travel set. So what we're going to be taking a look at is we are going to be taking a look at her paper pad. We are going to be using the paints. We're going to be taking a look at the water brush, and I've already gone ahead and rinsed the sizing out of this. I also want to point out that it is like reverse threaded to what we're used to in the US, which is something I see a lot with pack-in water brushes from AliExpress kits. So probably a budget water brush over here. Doesn't mean it doesn't work, just means they didn't spend a lot of money on it. And then our very budget watercolor brushes, which I am going to test out, but I am going to probably regret. Now, let's take a look again at the case. It seems to have a little bit of foam padding in it, not a whole lot. This part here, this lining, is made of that really cheap stuff that you see that tends to fray really badly with a lot of use. So while obviously I am going to use it, it is a somewhat hard-sided case and I think it is super cute. When it falls apart, it's going to fall apart, right? Like this is not going to last forever. It has one large loop and then 3 smaller loops and that's it. Like they really did not design this thing. Oh, and this here seems to be a glued in insert. Perhaps they bought just like pre-screened, because there's a lot of companies like even Art Scout, I think, will do these kind of print jobs, right? Actually, now that I think about it, I am getting Art Scout vibes from this. That's where I recognize this from. Anyway, it looks like they glued this in to kind of customize it a little more. Maybe this side had multiple loops. Maybe this side had nothing. I don't know. It has a dual zipper. It is not a YKK zipper, by the way. So that's another area where they cut costs, but it is cheap. It's just if you're buying this set for the case, and maybe some of us did that here, the case is not worth the price of admission. So wait for Michael's to have a sale. Wait for Michael's to have a coupon. Wait to redeem some of your vouchers. Then you can buy this. It's like the Jane Davenport stuff. Like let's be savvy. So this is the Brea Reese Artist Series featuring Josie Lewis. That kind of gives me hope. I'm hoping they're going to do more artist collabs, which will give me something to talk about here on the Easily Influenced series. I I just have this love, this need for Michael's art supplies. I don't really need them, but that's kind of what I grew up having access to, was Walmart art supplies and Michael's art supplies. So I have a fondness for checking it out. And sometimes you do find winners hiding amongst all the rest. It is a top gum-bound sheet. What is it? I think it's 25 pages. No further information. Decently thick chipboard on the back. That is actually pretty important because that's going to provide a lot of your structural stability unless you take this off and attach it to something. The pages are thin. I would say 90-pound, like cover stock weight. And it is clearly a cellulose paper with a texture embossed on the top, but not on the back. It may also have a little bit of sizing to be a little bit more receptive to watercolor, but you know, not the worst cellulose watercolor paper, but I'm betting it's not the best. We have the paints over here, and also something that kind of bothers me is the lid. You have to really push it in there to get it to nest. You can't just like rest it in there. It like snaps into place, which now you know to put some effort into it. So we are going to start with the water brush, and then we'll move on to these things over here. And I'm just going to swatch. We're just going to make our way down all of the rainbow colors. Maybe we'll do a rainbow road, maybe we will not. Now, there's a few reasons I don't love water brushes. I find it hard to control. As you apply pressure or as your hand heats up, they can release more water. Some people have, actually, the water brush on this paper is kind of fun. Also, then you got to clean it. So you're still going to be carrying around, some people use like a terry cloth, like little scrubber around, like a sweatband to scrub it off on. Some people use paper towels. Some people use a sponge. Kind of surprised, considering the provenance, I suspect, of these watercolors. They didn't include a sponge. They got plenty of room. Like, we got all this padding in here. Also, they stain super fast. So that doesn't really affect how well the water brush works, but it may make it harder for you to tell if you got all the paint out of it. Not a big deal. This is a really cheap one. It is very easy to apply a lot of pressure to it. You might think that's a good thing, but the more pressure you apply, the more water it's going to produce. So if you have fine motor control skills, and I do, I know a lot of my viewers do, the water brush might not be your friend. That does not mean there are not artists who make beautiful art with water brushes. There are. I am not one of them. I'm gonna attempt to do a really janky looking rainbow. I have a feeling if you were to use the bright set with this water brush, you would be constantly picking up way too much paint. It would constantly be turning to soup on you. It would just be a bad experience. So I would not necessarily recommend you use a water brush with the other palette we were just looking at. Your mileage may vary. Maybe you love water brushes. Maybe you can make gorgeous art with them. So this is where the layout kind of falls apart for me. Made sense chromatically. Then we switch over to this weird red violet. So we can't do a perfect rainbow road, but you know. Do we have to have a perfect rainbow road in our lives? You also want to be really careful if you're pushing down to get a lot of water. You don't release, because it's going to suck that paint up into the little spongy part in here. Another thing I learned that I didn't know before, one of my friends, Feather, in my art-centric Discord server, the Paint Box, told me this, is you really do need to let these things dry out. I knew they grew mold. I just thought that was inevitable. Apparently, I should have been letting it dry out. So thank you, Feather, for that tip. I really do kind of like these paints on this paper. It's not great quality cellulose, but I like the assertive texture. And since some of these paints have a fair amount of granulation to them, that's just kind of a fun add-on. I do not like this color down here. It is so weak. It is so unimpressive. I could have lived my life without that color. And of course, you know, the proof is really in how these things dry. So we're going to switch over to these things here. These cheap brushes with the cheap bristles, very short. So the problem with these is they don't have any kind of a belly to them. Not really. Now, when we say belly, what we mean is this part of the brush that kind of bellies out. Look, I mean, you do have a curve for the tip. It does come to a point, but the belly is going to be what holds water, and the belly is going to, well, see how much it drips? Drippity drip, drip, drip. I probably blocked the shot. It's going to drip a lot. So you have to be kind of careful with your water control. I don't love them, but you know, I've also been painting with brushes that I really, really like for years. So you probably could paint something with them. I would really like, considering there's a lot of cheap synthetics on the market that are good, like the Zen brushes. I like those. I would go, and they sell them at Michael's. They're probably in the aisle right behind where they're selling these kits. I would go ahead and just pick up a couple of better brushes. I know this kit is pretty expensive for what it is. It's actually very expensive for what it is, but let's say you are buying it for the case and you are buying it for the convenience. Buy yourself some better brushes. They don't have to be the best, but these are not good. These are kind of terrible. Now, I say that these would be great for applying masking fluid. They would also be okay for applying gouache. And if you do brush lettering, you might like these. I don't know. A lot of brush letterers like the really nice Kolinsky Sable rounds that come to like a really beautiful point and can carry ink or paint for days. And these are not those. But I say brush calligraphers because they have a lot, like a tremendous amount of snap. And they come to a really fine point. But they're just kind of garbagey. Now, I am not Josie Lewis. I'm not pretending to be Josie Lewis. I would like to field test these a smidge, just a little bit. I was thinking I would paint some cherry blossoms and I would attempt to do a loose floral style, not because Josie does that and not because I do that, but because it's something I've been kind of studying and I would just like to play around with it. And this feels like an opportunity to test out the paper and test out the brushes for something that someone might conceivably use this for. So the disclaimers are coming out. Not good at the loose watercolor florals. I'm still learning them. This is a practice exercise. It's really a chance for me to test out the paint on the paper in kind of a more limited capacity where I'm not really tied to doing something specifically or a specific way, and I don't feel like I have to make something perfect, and it doesn't have to be great. Just here to have fun and give you guys an honest review of how I feel about this product. Also, this is sold as a travel set. Realistically, it's kind of big to like pull out on your lap, on a plane, on a train, on a bus. It's probably for where you're going. You can put together smaller travel sets. I've talked about travel sets on the channel a lot here. That said, I do really like the case, and I will be scavenging this case for my own travel set. But I don't think it's worth the cost of admission. You can probably find a good case at Goodwill, at TJ Maxx, at Home Goods. There are places, you know, like it doesn't have to be that case. Michael's can be kind of expensive. But anyway, we're going to paint some cherry blossoms.
This paper really does not want to take water/paint from the water brush, so you have to push harder to get it to actually take the paint. I don't really like these paints on this paper. It's hard to particularly articulate all the whys. I feel like it's kind of obvious to see, but I realize that a lot of y'all might not get why. The wet into wet diffuse really weird and patchy, and while that could be a look, it isn't the look I'm going for. The short little brushes are awkward. It's really hard to pull long leaves with them, and I have to make multiple passes. The handles are kind of awkward as well. They're really short, which is normal for travel brushes, but I typically don't use travel brushes, so your mileage may vary. I think the brush itself is a bigger issue. everything dries really faded out unless you really cake it onto the paper. These paints just don't have much saturation or vibrancy on this paper. This feels like it's just a bad fit together. The paints did better on the swatch card, which is a different paper from the watercolor booklet, and it did better on the cotton rag as well. I don't expect them to include cotton rag, but like the combination of these watercolor products and their various cheapitudes sort of compounds into a frustrating and difficult to paint with issue. The water brush might be the best part, but that doesn't really get along with the paper that they've chosen to include here. So what are the pros of these Josie Lewis / Brea Reese watercolor sets? We're going to start with the travel set. So the pros, this set is currently on sale for around $17.99, so the price is much more reasonable than the $24.99 that I paid. The case, while not super well made, is very cute and it can be repurposed. The paints inside seem to be Superior brand. This is a brand that I have experience with and I like it. There is a mini watercolor techniques book and the watercolors themselves are well chosen and mix into some decent secondaries. The cons are the paper and the paints are not a good fit together. The water brush and the paper are not a good fit. The regular rounds are very cheap and fairly unpleasant to paint with. The techniques book covers very little and half of it is in French. There isn't a whole lot to this set in general. It doesn't feel like a very full set. And the mixing surface, which is the lid of the palette, is meh. So what about the bright set? Let's start with the pros. There are a lot of colors in a fairly compact set. These are larger pans, so it's easy to get a big brush in. And if the pans break, it's easy to melt it and reform it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of cons. There isn't much color payoff in these paints. They're kind of like a weak version of the travel set. It's not as easy to mix bright, vibrant colors, and the mixing surface is small and it stains pretty easily. So what's my verdict? For the sale price point, you aren't really going to get a comparable quality watercolor set compared to this travel set, even with all the problems we just talked about. I think at the sale price, this could make a great gift for an artist interested in dabbling with watercolor, perhaps a teenager who needs an easy-to-pack-up work kit. It can also be tweaked and customized here and there to be an even better watercolor experience. You can upgrade the brushes, swap out the paper, and it's a better kit. I do feel kind of weird giving that advice. I mean, that would make it almost an entirely different kit, but keeping the price point in mind, the sale price point, not the full price point, I think it's worth considering. I also think if you're a fan of Josie Lewis, this set might be right up your alley. The case is super cute, the colors fit in with the Josie Lewis color palette, and Superior watercolors aren't half bad. Currently, the on-the-go kit is $17.49, but it's regularly $24.99, and the Brights kit is $10.49 and regularly $14.99. I definitely think if you want to buy Josie Lewis watercolors, and this was the set sent to me by Mary Catherine to test out, this is a better and far less expensive experience than what I found with these. These are Mungyo watercolors, and while Mungyo watercolors are fine, it just doesn't really feel particularly Josie. It's got a sticker on it and that's about it. Whereas the travel set comes in a really cute, brightly colored case. The contents inside are cute and fun, and yes, they are branded to be Josie Lewis, so you do get that full vibe. And it even comes with this little watercolor technique guide, which while it's not as fully fleshed out as I would have liked to have seen,
It does come with some of her art, some inspiration, some ideas, something to kind of look at and aspire to. And I think this is actually the piece that is on the exterior of the case. I have not, and I'm not planning on trying all of the Josie Lewis kits that are available. There's several, many of them are acrylic, and I just don't do that much with acrylic, so I couldn't really speak to it. So I decided to kind of narrow my focus and talk about two that I felt like I could actually comment on and that you guys might benefit from seeing me talk about. So next, we are going to talk about that watercolor book that I showed you guys earlier. All right, so now we get to talk about Josie Lewis's book, The New Color Mixing Companion. Explore and create fresh and vibrant color palettes with paint, collage, and mixed media. And this book comes with templates. So I want to go ahead and preface this book review by saying this book kind of made me like Josie even more. You can really get a sense of her personality, her sense of humor. You can tell how smart she is. That said, I did not really find that book to be particularly helpful or particularly inspiring, which is kind of a shame because I really wanted to like this book, especially as Josie's personality really started to shine through. As you guys can see, I only marked two things as being worth coming back and revisiting. So this is another Quarry/Quattro book. The MSRP on this one is still $24.99. They really seem to like that price point for art books. I believe I paid like $13 for this book on Amazon. I may have gotten it used. I don't really remember. And this book review is coming right after I finished reviewing Josie's Brea Reese collabs. And I really kind of feel like this book and those collabs, while they weren't done intentionally, when was this book? When did this book come out? 2019, yeah. I don't think they were done intentionally. They work well together. And if you like Josie's work and you're interested in the Brea Reese collection, I would recommend you go ahead and pick up this book, particularly if you can find it at a good price point. So Josie's work is almost all color work. There isn't a lot of like pictorial or narrative work to it. So I thought that this book would be perfect because color work is an area I'm weak at, and it would be interesting to see what she has to say. So I was really hoping she was going to talk a lot about her color theory, her color usage, how her brain thinks about color. So on page 12, she mentions seamless color transitions, the glow, ombre, gradients, tiny shapes. And I asked, are these things she plans on teaching us? That we didn't really talk about that, and I was kind of hoping we would. She also talks about what she calls the mother method on page 13. So it's a lot like kombucha or like a sourdough starter, where you always leave a little of what came before to inform your next batch. I feel like this works well for how she paints, and I'm not sure I can leave painty palettes out in the open with cat hair in the air. I've seen a lot of other watercolor artists use this method. So it's a valid method. It's just not a valid method for everybody, particularly if you have small children, pets, people over at your house, or you don't have a workspace that you can just kind of leave out. Her palette with the mother is actually her palette in the shot, and I'm going to include some footage that I just took to show the palette Mary Catherine sent me against the palette in the book. Also, I'm just going to say this, if I look a little weird, if I'm being a little weird, I'm having a lot of Sjogren's symptoms today. I may be projecting more than, I don't know how it's gonna come across. I'm kind of having to force it because I don't have a whole lot of voice. This is not like I'm not upset at Josie. I really like Josie. I am not mad about anything. I'm just having symptoms today, and while I really wanted to record this and I'm not feeling terrible, it does have some impact. So if you see my nose running or my eyes being all weird, it's Sjogren's. I have a quote that says, and then there is that Instagram artist who makes their thing look amazing and easy, and you rush in to get their kit. And that's on page 14. I was like, girl, that's you. And I mean, I can like really vibe with that sentiment as somebody who reviews a lot of art supplies and is very easily influenced by other artists and what they're using and how they present it and how they sell it. I am also the one who like rushes to the store to go buy that thing to see if it's really all that people say it is. So like, while she's definitely doing that with this book and the Brea Reese kits, like I'm the audience for that. I'm very susceptible to that. She overhypes how expensive art supplies can be. Yes, they can be pricey, but there are ways to save money, and this is where reviews can be really helpful. This book covers a variety of media, and in the studio supply section on page 14, she breaks it down by media, what grade she uses, her favorite colors, other materials, and the projects in the book that use this media. And I really like that she does this. This makes it a little bit easier to utilize this book based on what you have, based on what you're interested in, based on what knowledge set you're looking to build on. On page 18, she goes on and on about watercolor being like a bad boyfriend. Like, there's a, you know what, I'll just read it. I'll read it to you guys. Watercolors. I have had a long-term off and on again relationship with watercolors. As they say, it's complicated. I mean, I love watercolors. I love them. All those colors you can just fit in your pocket. The ease, the versatility, the luminosity, but they're also maddeningly capricious. To me, watercolors are like a charming but inconsistent boyfriend who's hard to dump. I mean, watercolors and I totally have a codependent relationship. They have so much promise, so many delightful colors. They bring me flowers and sweet nothings and then destroy me with their intransience. The bad boyfriend watercolors fail me repeatedly, but then I let them come over because they have so much potential. I can't trust them, but they're so charismatic. With regularity, I say, I'm moving on. That's it. I'm kicking you to the curb. There are plenty of other art supply fish in the sea, like oil paints and resin and gouache. But then those half pans call to me so seductively, so enticing, so easy. And the 140-pound paper feels so nice. And honestly, how much harm could there be just to drink some wine and paint a few hexagons? Netflix and chill, anyone? But then the next morning, I see what a mess I made of my studio with limp and unsatisfying paintings lying around everywhere, and no one even made me breakfast. Watercolor, I shake my fist at you, but I love you. Never leave me. I get it, but like some example of how they're feeling her would be really helpful for like, it's very funny and pretty relatable, and I think we've all had that like ex who like really can get under your skin and you really should cut things off, but just one more time won't hurt, right? So like I get that. I kind of feel that way about how comics as an industry has treated me. So like I get it, but I would like some more salient examples of just how watercolor is this bad boyfriend. How is watercolor letting you down? What are the promises and how are they, you know, defeating you? And I love watercolor. Like me and watercolor have a very different relationship. Watercolor is like Joseph, reliable, stable. We understand each other. We know how to get the best out of each other. So like we have such different experiences with watercolor that I'm really curious about how our experiences are differing and why. Is it the materials you're using? Maybe. Is it the methods that you're using? Perhaps. I really like consistency, and so I have tested out and tried out a bunch of different watercolors, a bunch of different papers to find methods that work well for me, that will help me get the results that I want time and time again. So like the watercolor teacher in me wants to like problem solve Josie's problems. I don't think that was the point of that section. I think a lot of people find watercolor to be mercurial. It is beautiful, but they don't understand how to get the most out of it. And I think Josie's just trying to be relatable to them. I get that, but a lot of what I try to do here on the channel, and maybe I fail at doing that, is to try and show you how watercolor can be consistent and how it doesn't have to be mercurial unless you want it to be mercurial. Josie's kind of funny, I give her that, but a bit more one-to-one comparison in that instance would have been helpful. I appreciate the templates are downloadable. They're in the back of the book. I was kind of flipping around just a little bit and making notes as I wrote, just kind of experiencing the book. So on page 19, she talks about her watercolor kit. And like, to be fair, most of my focus about this book is going to be on the watercolor aspects, because in general, that is what I'm the most qualified to talk about. I have some experience with acrylics, and I have very minimal experience with collage. Her watercolor essential colors are opera pink, quinacridone coral, pyrrole orange, lemon yellow, phthalo yellow green, phthalo green blue, manganese blue, ultramarine turquoise, phthalo blue red shade, indanthrone blue, imperial purple, and naphthalide maroon. I do actually see some of those colors reflected in the Mungyo palette, as well as her collabs with Michaels, but some of them not so, like, I'm not really seeing like the quin coral. I'm not really seeing the phthalo yellow green. I'm not even really seeing the manganese blue, because manganese blue has an opacity to it that none of the colors she's included really carry that well. I know she's using Mungyo, but I want to try her palette with nicer brands to see how I feel about it. Also, her brush price range is really cheap, $3 to $5. She says she doesn't use the really budget brushes, and I'm not here to shame or yuck anybody's yum. I have friends who love synthetic brushes. I think synthetic brushes do have their place, but I have personally found the $3 to $5 brushes, that's like the Princeton Snap range, the Zen, those tend to be a little too stiff for how I like to watercolor. The layers and the glazes, it will scrape those up. So I'm wondering if watercolor is a bad boyfriend because she's using cheaper paint and cheaper brushes on cheaper paper, which you can, and I do, make art with those materials all the time, but you're gonna have a better experience if you upgrade at least one of those three. She also mentions a 140-pound cold press, but she doesn't mention if it's cellulose or cotton rag. As we've talked about in this series, that makes a huge difference. She doesn't mention what brand she's using or what she likes for like any of this. We do see her palette frequently, and I know that's Mungyo because I've reviewed it, but she's not really talking about her brands. So like, as an intermediate painter who has a different watercolor experience than her and may just genuinely have more hours of painting in watercolor than she does, because I paint a watercolor comic, and that is thousands of hours of painting. Not saying she doesn't paint a lot, and not saying that she's an artist, it's just watercolor comic, thousands of hours of painting. So Josie mentions how painting got her through a bad time, and I can relate. Her story is very sensitive, so I'm not going to share that here. If you're curious, you can read the book, but I will share mine because it is mine to share. So I first started painting watercolor, again, like I dabbled with it and I didn't like it and I didn't really put any time into it, and I was using really garbage materials on really garbage paper, and the internet wasn't what it is now. There weren't the resources, and I lived in a small town that also didn't have the resources, and I didn't have any kind of mentorship whatsoever. So it was a lot of failing on my part. When I was self-taught in the true sense of, like, I was fumbling on my own with no direction, no help, nothing, and I was making no improvement. So I wasn't like really into watercolor until grad school. Those of you who watch my channel, those of you who know me, grad school was really hard on me. I went for sequential art, and it wasn't necessarily the workload that was really getting me, although it was a significant workload. It was the ridiculously unnecessary sexism that was really just grinding me down. It was teachers who told you you could rely on them and trust them, who would turn around and tell you to stop complaining when you got harassed. It was a lot. It was garbage. And I talked about that in my Comics Broke Me video, so if you're really curious about that, you can check that out. Joseph and I we had started dating in Louisiana, and then I went to grad school in Georgia, and we were long distance, and I really didn't want to do long distance, and I was like miserable from long distance. And my dad had actually just died like a year before, and I really did not want to be in Louisiana to process those things. So I went to Georgia to process those things. So it was a lot going on. A friend of mine, we're still friends, Electric Abyss, taught me how to do watercolors, and I decided that I wanted to use watercolors to add the color element to my graduate project, 7-inch Cara. And I found it really exciting, yet centering and rewarding. It allowed me to like carve out some agency and carve out some brain space and carve out some calm in a... Comics is very hectic. Comics in aggregate is very, they really push you to produce things very quickly to pump out the content. And the internet is the same way. And watercolor takes the time it takes. It is a relationship. You cannot force watercolor the way you can force digital art, the way you can sometimes force traditional inks. And I really liked that watercolor took the time it took and demanded the time it needed. And that kind of gave me permission to slow things down. So I really, really, really like watercolor. It still calms me. It still helps me find center. It's really good for my ADHD. It really helps me regulate my nervous system. I just love it so much. It has done so much for me in this regards. Professionally, it has done probably nothing for me. It's probably kept me from pursuing better paying opportunities, more steady work. But I love it, okay? Watercolor is the boyfriend that I truly, sincerely believe in, and he's a good guy, and the world just doesn't appreciate him for who he is. And I still make watercolor comics. You guys can check out my watercolor comics, 7-inch Kara. I'll have the link here. I'll do like a little scroll here. You can read it for free as a webcomic. It would mean the world to me. So like, that's where I'm coming from. Also, as I talk about these books, as I talk about the paints, is I have 2 degrees in art. One of them is in comics. I fell in love with watercolor while I was in grad school, and I still practice watercolor more than 10 years later. Her book is one of the most personable, and it shows she has a deeper interest in art. Like, she talks about the invention of aluminum tubes on page 24. And on page 30, girl mentions thumbnails. Good on you, Josie. And she includes a photo, and I appreciate that. I would have loved to have seen more examples of her thumbnails, more examples of like her thought process, more photos of her studio and how she sets up her workspace, all of that, because I love sketchbooks, I love studios, I love process, I love seeing how other artists think. And that's been my big disappointment with all of these influential artist books, is I really want a sketchbook, like an ash can, like what comic artists used to release on the regular, what I wish we still could justify releasing on the regular. I want to get in her head. On page 50, there's a tip about checking your piece's value and contrast with a phone camera and desaturating it to black and white, and that is a good tip. I appreciate that. I feel like Josie's doing an art book that explores the medium and color and avoiding draw-heavy projects. But some of these are very to include in a book as a project, like the Freud on page 54. It's a Rorschach or an inkblot test, and I just like, you could mention doing that, you could mention exploring that in your sketchbook. That would be a good like other projects to explore, other ways to get your creativity going kind of thing. But I don't really think it fits as a project in an art book designed to get people making art. I'm surprised her chunky acrylics don't use any kind of acrylic medium to give them bulk or fluff them out. I was kind of hoping she had some trick for an extender, and this comes up on page 62. That's just straight up paint. Like that, even she's using student grade paint. That is a lot of paint. They do sell extender and bulk mediums. I think Blick has several of them. I am not super familiar with acrylic in this regard. I do like chunky textural acrylics. I don't necessarily think this is a waste of paint. She has mentioned on her Instagram, like in her artist hotline, it's very cute reel series. It's super funny that people have called it a waste of paint before. I don't see it as a waste of paint, but I do know there are extender mediums, and I would have been interested to see her talk about extender mediums and how she uses extender mediums in her work. But it seems like maybe she doesn't. Or if she does, maybe she didn't want to talk about this in an intro book because that might complicate things. On page 77, she talks about art scars. So on page 77, she talks about art scars. In fact, she starts introducing these like editorial interstitials, like blog posts. I actually really, really like them. I would probably buy a book of Josie Lewis's art and like her thoughts. Like, this is the process I want to get into. This is where you can really tell how smart she is and how much she thinks about this. And this is something I don't think we see in enough of these artist books. It's something, as an intermediate artist with a lot of experience, I would like to see more of. So she talks about her art scars. I'm not going to go into them because that's her story. You can read it in her book. But both of my parents enjoyed art, but art scars kept them from pursuing it even as a hobby into adulthood. And I spend a lot of time as an art teacher soothing art scars in kids and adults. Like, it takes up a lot of class encouraging people to believe in themselves and take the risk and try something new and to trust me because I'm the teacher and I kind of know what I'm talking about. My own art scars aren't from childhood, but from adulthood. And I really appreciated that little aside. It's very personable. It lets you get to know her. Even if you didn't know Josie as an artist, if you weren't familiar with her Instagram, this gives you a look into her head, and it kind of gives you like the vibe that she's a good person and she has a good heart, which I know, a little parasocial of me to say that. We don't know each other at all, but it's a friendlier feeling, and it's also her just kind of letting down her guard and just talking in a real way that a lot of these influential artists don't like to do because they're all good vibes only people. But art isn't just good vibes. Josie spends a lot of time trying to relate and connect with her audience, and I appreciate that. So I did kind of skip ahead, and I noticed that she has a resources section and a works cited section. Good on her. This is the first influential artist art book I've seen that does this. You could tell she has like some background in, I want to be very careful in how I say this. So lots of educational disciplines teach you to make a works cited page, teach you to cite your references. I know if you go to school for education, that is required because I helped my mom with hers when she was going back for additional education in her teaching degree. I know that in Earth Environmental Sciences, which is what I minored in, you have to be able to do this. I know in petrochemical engineering, you have to be able to do this. I know in computer science, you have to be able to do this. I know for a fact in art, you have to be able to do this. So I feel like even if you only have a high school degree, most of us are taught to cite our work in our essays. So I do not understand why these other influential artists do not. But good on Josie for doing it. You can tell she has a background and that she takes it seriously, and she knows how to present this information in a way that enables her readers to continue their education. Thank you. Love to see it. Everyone else should be at your level. So on page 83, she also has a blurb on talent that I think is pretty great. She basically doesn't believe in talent. We have kind of the same viewpoint on this, where it's like 80% effort, 10% luck, 10% talent. I do kind of believe that some people have an innate ability to do things. They have an eye for color. They may have better fine motor skills. They may not have a debilitating disease. They might be born in an area where there's lots of museums and lots of affordable art education programs that even if they're lower income, they can attend. They may live out in the sticks where they have no access to any of that. I do believe there are all of these factors that can go into whether or not you have a shot at success. But that does not stop you from learning. It does not stop you from utilizing the internet to pursue an education. It doesn't stop you from developing skills. Even if you're bad at making art, you can still make art and still derive enjoyment and benefit from making art. So I feel like we're kind of along the same lines as that. Now, I have found that luck, however you wish to call it, whether it is not dealing with significant anxiety, not having ADHD, having parents who are well connected, what have you. Like when we're born, it is all a dice roll for who we get to be. I do think luck plays a bigger role, but I didn't let it stop me. I'm still trying and failing. I would encourage you not to let it stop you. You can't help your luck. You can just do the best with what you got. So I want to like this book. I feel like Josie has things to say and is well educated and informed, but there isn't much to really learn from this book for me. I feel bad saying this, like I'm just kind of missing something. And she has this kind of, I am not diagnosing her, by the way. She has kind of this like ADHD vibe that I like really resonate with as I felt as an ADHD. she correlates different subjects to art and process, and I really like that about her. I feel weird saying this because it's like I'm saying I want fewer projects and more just her art and more just how she thinks about her art. I think that's where she really shines, and I would like to see more of that from her. Okay, this is like an embroidery project book, then a learn color book. A lot of repetition, but you're not supposed to do the projects in 1, 2, 3 order. You're supposed to kind of pick the projects that you like. Some of them do build on each other, but it's not like she expects you to do acrylic, watercolor, collage, acrylic, watercolor, collage. Like you could do just the acrylic, you could do just the watercolor, you could do just the collage. You could pick the ones you like and not necessarily do the rest. On page 136, I appreciate the section on lighting your work. So it's called Practical Considerations, and it's like a little, very short. I would have actually liked to have seen more on this because I really like how she does this on her Instagram, but it's a section on lighting and photographing your work. I learned some tips that I'd kind of forgotten. I think she could really explore it more. I would love it. I honestly would truly love it if these art influencers and influential artists would really talk about that part of their craft. If they would really talk about how they built up their audience and how they light their work and how they stage their work and what goes through their head when they're thinking about these things and what decisions didn't pan out. What did they choose to no longer do? What did they move away from? I feel like that is probably a dangerous and big ask, but I would love to see it. And I think someone with Josie's personality could just be so funny, could be very real about it. It could be very relatable. I think Josie's the one to do it. She has an MFA. It makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that she didn't try to hide it. She didn't try to obfuscate it. She didn't use weird cherry pick words like self-taught watercolor artist when like you have a degree in art though, like, you know. So like I appreciate that she doesn't try to hide it or obfuscate it, because I feel like being honest about it makes it easier for her readers to make their own decisions about what they need to do and who they can trust. I like her writing style. She is quite personable, and while the projects are all quite appealing, none of them really quite clicked for me. I'd hope for more acrylic projects, more variation in watercolor, and a lot more photos and art. The book itself feels a bit sparse. I also expected more about how Josie thinks about color. While I legit relate with her color recognition stories, I did similar with my crayons and my mom's fabric and my aunt's embroidery thread. She didn't really talk about how she thinks about it. So since she didn't, I will just a little bit. I have in some of my videos, I see color as kind of like, honestly, it's kind of the way like Photoshop or other graphics programs depict color, where you have like your yellow and then it like radiates out. And I start from the left hand side, so it's like yellow to red, then yellow to green, green to blue, all the way down. I'll put in a shot of my ginormous watercolor palette. The row at the bottom, just kind of ignore that. Those are specialty colors. They were in a separate palette and I had room, so I added them. But this is kind of how I think about color. I used to organize my crayons this way. When I reorganize markers, I organize them this way. This is what is helpful for me. Contrapose that to how I organize my markers. I'll have a shot here. I like having them in those drawers. I can pull those drawers out. I can pick the colors I need for individual projects. I don't have a good way to have like all of my markers just out and in order, especially because you need to store them horizontally. But that's kind of how I think about color. And it would have been really cool to see how Josie thinks about color, and to see what Josie's studio looks like, and to see whether she puts art up on her walls or she doesn't, or if it's like Jenna Rainey's studio where it is like very much meant for recording, or if it's just like a corner in her house that she gets joy from, or is she like Jane Davenport where she has like a whole section of the house, maybe it's a she shed, I can't really tell, where she can make art. I am interested in these things. My studio is a disaster. I am looking for inspiration. Unless everyone else's is as bad as mine, and then I'd like to see shots of that because that would make me feel better. It would make me feel less alone and less gross. But yeah, that's something else I'd like to see from these books. I really also wanted to know like what makes her brain go burr, because like all of this, all of her art, I feel like it is designed to like hit that part of your brain. Maybe not everybody's like this. Maybe it's an ADHD thing. Maybe it's an artist thing. Maybe it's a trad media artist thing. I don't know. But it's all stuff that makes your brain be like, I believe she also talks about, and I might be mixing up something she said on social media, or someone else said it, or it was in her book, so don't quote me. I believe she said something about how pattern work is usually just seen as women's work and not seen as a fine art. And I hope I'm crediting the right person to this. That historically that is true. Like if you look at the history of embroidery, it's definitely true. Any of this fine, intricate work is typically seen as women's work, and thus completely devalued for what it can do for people, for what it does for people, for what it brings to people's lives. So comics, while not being seen as women's work, it is seen as degenerative, or just for children, or lesser, and cartoony art or caricatured art is treated the same way, although historically it was not treated that way. So like I kind of like resonate with that. I feel like we could have like a really interesting conversation, me, her, and Jane Davenport, about the intersection of pattern play and pattern work, color work, caricaturized figurative work, and how women are treated in society. That would be really fun. That will probably never happen, but that would be super cool. Even if it was just her and Jane Davenport, that would be really cool. And I appreciate that, like, it wasn't like super into the weeds about it. It wasn't super complaining, but it was like an acknowledgement of like, when women do this, it is typically ignored. It is typically not treated as art, because that is a reality. I'll tell you guys a quick story. So as you guys who know me or know of me know, like I mentioned, I'm a comic artist, and I used to do a lot of anime cons, and I was pretty popular for a smaller artist who doesn't do fan art, who does a lot of commissions, who does girly stuff. Like I'm very niche, but I did quite well in that arena, and it just was wearing on me. It was killing me to do all these shows, etc., etc. So I'm transitioning into craft fairs, which is an entirely different world with an entirely different demographic. I'm still selling similar stuff, but I'm transitioning some of my stuff, and I'm learning, and I'm seeing what products work and which ones don't. And I promise I'm not bringing my anime con stuff to craft fairs. Just because like that demographic is not there here in Louisiana. So older women will come up to my booth and they think Joseph did everything. And when they think Joseph did everything, they love it. They love everything in the booth. It's all wonderful. And Joseph will say, no, my wife did it. And then they lose interest. And my mom suggested I just ask them, like, hey, you were so into it a moment ago. What made you lose interest? And she's probably right. I feel like that's a little more confrontational than I want to be. I usually just smile, and I'm like, if there's if you have any questions, I can answer them for you. I would actually like to understand the psychology of what's going on in that moment, because I do know historically girls growing up in Louisiana, especially from middle and lower class families, were actually pushed away from art. It's seen as very frivolous. It's seen as a waste of money. Whereas girls who are raised in more financially wealthy families, they're encouraged to do arts, but much in the same way that Georgian girls were encouraged to do art. Like, it's something to refine you, but don't take it too seriously. Don't think you can do this for a living. Don't think you could do this professionally. And that is changing. Like, I wasn't really raised with that mindset, but I was raised by somebody who was. So she was very supportive of me, but there's still the echoes of that. And I wonder how much of that is echoes of how we raise our girls here, not to pursue frivolous, expensive hobbies, or if it is legitimately because I'm a woman and that like kills the it goes from like art to hobby, art to craft for them. Or, and I don't mean to denigrate crafts, but crafts are traditionally denigrated. Or if, I don't know. I'm not in their minds. I would be curious to know about that though. And that kind of segues into my interest, and there's research to back this up, that when people think a man did something, it's seen as more professional, but when there's a female name attached, it's seen as more of a hobby. So, you know, interesting conversation that has nothing to do with this whatsoever. Anyway, I like Josie. I like her art. I like her personality. This book just wasn't for me. I was really hoping that this book would give me some ideas for things to do with the Michaels kits that I bought of hers. I feel like this is just my opinion based on what I saw at Michaels. They may be releasing more projects. I'm not putting Josie down whatsoever. I feel like the acrylic projects at Michaels, and I'll show some of them, are more projects meant to make a something that you can put up. And the watercolor projects are more coloring for relaxation or just more art supplies. I don't know. It feels like the acrylic projects also have more room for your imagination while still teaching you how to do the thing. Whereas the watercolor ones, you're either on your own or it is very fill it in the way Josie does. And that's, you know, there is a market for that. There are people who like that, like people like my mom who have had, as she would tell you, all of the art just squished out of her from those art scars from like her 3rd grade teacher telling her dandelions aren't green. They can be green. There's green to dandelions. I think her watercolor projects fit that niche quite well, and maybe that can help build up confidence and help build up assurance, and maybe then they'll want to move on to something more personalized and personable and something of their own. But I just didn't really, I personally as the reviewer didn't really feel inspired to take the products that I bought at Michaels and do some of the projects in her book. That said, and she doesn't mention it, she is using her Mungyo palette, the one that we talked about here. She is using that for this book. I think I probably said in the review I don't really understand how she's doing that. She explains it a little bit better with the mother method, and that she never fully cleans her, it seems like she never fully cleans her palettes, so there's always some paint from the last time to influence the next colors. Like, that makes sense to me. I don't work in the same way, so that would be why I didn't see that for myself and why I'm glad I read the book. I do wish she made it more clear that if you buy her palette, you might benefit from her book and vice versa. But that's not really a huge complaint. So, that was my review of the new color mixing companion by Josie Lewis. So what do you guys think? I'm interested in hearing your thoughts and your opinions. Did you purchase these sets and this book as well? Do you feel the same way as I do, or do you have a different opinion? I just want to remind you guys, you're welcome to share your opinion down in the comments below. Let's be respectful to each other, but you are totally free to feel quite differently than I do about any of these things. That's one of the things that makes being an artist and making art so cool, is we all have our different likes and our different dislikes, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing the Easily Influenced series, is I like looking at what other artists like that maybe I didn't like and giving it a second chance and looking at their work and seeing how they use it in their work. I think that's really cool. I also like getting to the bottom of things, and I like deciding whether or not products are a good fit for me and sharing the information that I found with you guys in case you find it helpful, useful, or informative. So we are going to start with the 2 products from Michaels, and the store display at my store was interestingly placed. It was placed in the art supply section when historically the Jane Davenport stuff is like firmly in the like scrapbooking section. So it was interesting that the Josie Lewis collection was in the back with the art supplies, but I wasn't even looking for it when I found it. I just kind of happened upon it. I knew there was a chance they would have one, but I wasn't like actively searching for one, and it was on an end cap that they change often. Whereas historically with the Jane Davenport stuff, it's in the section, like it's you have to go in the section, but it's there, which kind of implies that it was thought maybe it was going to be a more permanent thing. I don't really know. This one felt more transitory. Also, my Michaels has never sold Brea Reese stuff. That was Hobby Lobby that sold Brea Reese stuff in this area. So I wonder if the Brea Reese is now moving to Michaels, or if this is a one-time thing or what. I don't actually know anything about that, so if you guys do, that would be interesting. These went on sale for about 30% off. They are currently on sale for 30% off when I am reviewing it, like recording this part, but they weren't when I bought them. I bought them for full price, and I don't know if that price point is going to stay. I did have some Michaels rewards though that I put towards it. So I didn't really pay full price, but I also didn't get the sale price either, if that makes sense. Like I could have used those rewards points on anything else, but I chose to use them on this. I have mixed feelings, which, who is surprised? Okay. So I would recommend you skip the watercolor pan set. Although it swatches quite bright, it's got a lot of problems. It's expensive for what it is. I would put it comparable to Prang or Yarka watercolors, and I would just say get the Yarka watercolors instead. And I mean the Yarka children's watercolors, not like their student grade watercolors. I did actually kind of like the travel set. I really like the case. I think the case is really cute. The paints inside, I believe, are Superior brand watercolors. You do get like little chiclets of the paint, which is one of the reasons I think they are Superior brand watercolors. And their presentation is kind of like elementary school watercolor. To be fair, the Brea Reese could have come up with a better way to present this, and that's where I feel this little paint pan set feels more Josie Lewis than the little metal tin that these are in. But that's just kind of like, I realize it's like not deal breaker material. The watercolor pad that came inside here is a cellulose watercolor pad. It does not play particularly well, in my opinion, with the paints that she included or with the brushes. I don't like the brushes that she included. This is the little field test I did with it. I was going for some loose watercolor florals. I am pleased with what I have learned. This paper does not reflect what I have learned. So I'm not like a big fan of, I feel like I like the watercolor kit, but I don't like most of the aspects of the watercolor kit. And that's weird, right? That's some mixed feelings. So what I feel about the watercolor kit is that it has room to grow. So get rid of these brushes. These brushes are terrible. You can keep the water brush, it's fine. It's comparable to a Dollar Tree water brush. You can pick up some more water brushes at Dollar Tree. I would sub these out for the Zen watercolor brushes. You can also find them at Michaels. They're kind of overpriced at Michaels. They're cheaper over on Blick, and they're cheaper at David's if you live in Louisiana. I would also sub the paper out. Maybe Canson XL, the spiral bound sketchbook. It won't really fit in here, but that would kind of go with this. And then you could fill this pocket with other goodies. Maybe you could get a small block of cotton rag if you wanted to put some cotton rag in here. Just not this block. I don't like this block. Both kits came with a little techniques booklet, which is promising, but half of it's in French, so it's not as long as it looks. And it really just didn't go into the techniques as much as I would like. That said, I liked this travel kit better than I like the Mungyo palette that she was selling. I don't know if she's selling it anymore. Now I have to check. We will find out. We will scroll and we will find out if she's still selling this. But this is the one she was selling on her website. It is not even really white labeled. Like, it's in a little plain black tin with her sticker on it. And they are Mungyo watercolors, and they're fairly bright, but it's like very similar to the Jane Davenport Bright set or the Prima Marketing Bright set. So like, you can find these, and you can find the Mungyo watercolors cheaper. Wow, as I say this, I'm like talking myself out of it. I do like the travel set better. I'm glad they went with superior watercolors for the travel set. I wish they had gone with a bigger selection of the superior watercolors for the travel set. While I like the superior chiclets in general, I wish they had gone with the superior half pans for this set, because you would have gotten more paint. And that's kind of giving some Amy Tangerine vibes from when we reviewed her palette. It's bright, it's colorful. Listen, Josie, I like your art a lot. I would buy your art on things. I have not finished putting the stuff up in my house. I will probably end up buying some of your art because I like your art. Josie, your art is so good for surface design. It is. I would wear it on a shirt. I would buy it as a bag. I would buy it on pencils, on pencil cases, on Casetify screen protectors if they made them for my phone. I like your art. The art supplies that you sell, I don't like so much, and I get that you use them. In fact, on that note, she uses this palette in her book. Like, this is what she's using. There is no deception there. She is not upselling you. She is not using nicer palette paints in this book and then trying to sell you her palette. She's using this palette. I appreciate that. I'm not like the biggest fan of Mungyo paints personally, but she's using what she says she uses, and she's using what she's selling, and honestly, that's all I can ask of most art influencers. That's really all I'm expecting. I feel like I would rather buy Josie's art on things than I would Josie's art supplies, and I feel like that's kind of the opposite of me and my customer base. I'm just guessing here. I feel like y'all would rather buy art supplies I recommend than you would rather buy my art. I would rather buy Josie's art on things, her art in general, than buy her art supplies. So I did actually buy this travel set because I like the case, and I am going to use the case for other things. So I'm probably biased there. If they had just sold the case at half the price, I probably would have bought the case. If she ever does a Happy Planner collaboration, please call me. Please, 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 because I will most certainly buy that. Anyway, I feel like I don't really have a good conclusion for this one. Technically, there is not art supply redemption, but I like Josie Lewis a lot more after reading her book. You can see her personality shine through. You can see how intelligent she is. And not saying that doesn't come across in social media, but in social media, it is so much harder to really see how smart somebody is because it's just short snippets. It's so much easier for a typo to get through and people to think make stupid judgments about you based on a typo than it is for people to really appreciate what you have to say and what you have to offer. And I really did like her book, although I did not find the projects in it to be helpful. I just want like a book of Josie essays, honestly. She seems like a fun and quirky person, and I feel like she's kind of okay. So something she shared on social media was that she was putting in for like the Minnesota State Fair Art Show, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to dig. And that she didn't get in. And y'all, I related so hard. I appreciated her sharing this because this is a woman who's done a book with Quattro. This is a woman who's doing a Michaels collaboration. Her work has been in several different places. Like the Quattro books love talking about all of the podcasts that you've been on and all the products that you've been on. Like, this is somebody who has accomplished so much more professionally than I have. And she's still getting rejections. And I appreciated that moment of honesty. was something that I deal with that kind of rejection or just being ignored and invisible all the time. And I really appreciated that authenticity and that honesty. And you know, they encourage you to be authentic online, but then no one is truly sharing their lows. So when you want to talk about the downsides of things, it's hard to know how to talk about it without complaining. And I feel like she did that quite well. So I'm leaving this liking Josie as a personality and as an artist so much more, but still not really liking her art supplies all that much. So I feel kind of bad about that. But if she ever does a collab with Happy Planner, let me know. This ADHD girl who loves bright colors will definitely be buying that and probably telling everyone I know to buy that. So do I recommend these things? Ish with caveats. We talked about it more in the individual sections. I think on sale, this could make a really good Christmas present for a teenage artist who travels a lot. There's room to grow, there's room to augment things. It's fun and colorful without being childish. The paints are fine. You could switch it out for higher quality paints if you want. You could gut that set and put a bunch of half pans in that tin. You could really change it up if you want to. The water brush is fine. I would switch out those brushes. Don't love that watercolor paper. I feel bad saying all these things. I would not, I ended up, to keep it from blowing away, I ended up bending it. I would not get this. This is not anything worth recommending. And as for her little Mungyo palette, while Mungyo watercolors are not the worst by any shakes, when you white label things, that does make them more expensive. You do have to charge a markup because you're buying them and then reselling them. So just from an economic point of view, I would recommend just getting the Mungyo set on Amazon. They're 12, 24, 48, and I think the 48 is still less than her 12 set. I would go with the Mungyo watercolors, and then you can paint along with her book if you want to give the gift of her book. But I really like her art. I really like her personality. I just feel like these products did not do the best job of showcasing that. So I hope today's Easily Influenced was helpful, useful, and inspiring for you guys. If any brand reps are watching, y'all, Josie's art is so good for surface design. There is a market for products with her stuff on it. Please consider hiring her to design your products. Her art is colorful, it is joyful, it is inspiring. Please pay her to do your surface design. Her stuff is super cute, and I would like to buy more useful items with her stuff on it. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for chatting in the premiere. If you guys have comments, leave them down below. We can disagree, that is fine. I am not going to delete what you have to say so long as you treat me with respect. I will treat you with respect, and let's treat everybody with respect. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you guys again soon with another review, tutorial, or Easily Influenced. Bye guys!